As the second phase of the Southern Africa Climate Finance Partnership draws to a close, stakeholders were asked to reflect on their experiences of the project during a 3-day learning journey event held in South Africa.
Finding out about the requirements of the GCF was a bit of a shock, particularly in terms of the length of time it takes, as well as the requirements and the intensity that's required in order to go through the GCF process and to ultimately become accredited.
In participating in activities that were offered through the SACFP, it gave us a head start to really think about this whole GCF in another light. It brings a different perspective to what we are used to. The more you learn about it, the more you assess yourself and learn new approaches.
The primary approach of the project was that of facilitating programmatic peer-to-peer learning engagements, with the understanding that some institutions are a little bit further down the road and thus have lessons to share to help others along their way.
Having interacted with other colleagues in the region, I'm happy because I realized that it actually is possible.
We gained a better understanding on how best we can effectively convey the message to spark conversations around climate change.
We were able to hit the nail on the head, clearly express the issues. Our policies were able to sail through management very quickly. They were approved in a very short space of time, and we were able to prepare policies that were acceptable to GCF.
From the site visit that we did today, we managed to observe that there are quite a number of opportunities from what we see as challenges. For instance, they are harvesting something that is an invasive species to come up with a product that is profitable. We think we have thorns, there are opportunities in another way.
The program provided support to individuals within key institutions, helping them to move into their new emerging roles, empowered by the collective knowledge and experiences of others in the region.
It shed some light to the point that people are now starting to ask more structured and relevant questions in regard to their participation in the climate financing and climate change spectrum.
From this position, stakeholders were able to begin to coordinate more cohesively amongst national institutions and seek connections at a regional scale.
The SACFP helped build stakeholder awareness of the role of the Ministry of Finance as the national designated authority to the Green Climate Fund. The first engagement with the private sector, we got to see who we're working with and what we need to look for. Now we need to be sector specific and target people who will be able to use GCF facilities well.
The team quickly learned from stakeholders that having access to knowledge is not always enough to effect change.
For changes to happen in institutions, there must be a commitment from within to change.
You also needed to get the buy-in of the leadership in the organization.
We wanted them to hear direct from people who had walked the journey before us. Allow me to thank SSN for introducing us to DBSA and other climate stakeholders in the region. They had walked the journey, so they were taking us through the real-life examples of climate finance implementation.
Ultimately, I think the goal is to get the organization to think climate, but you need some sort of a catalyst to enable that movement. You need a driver and a pioneer.
After seeing such an opportunity, we thought it wise to come up with an individual who is going to spearhead the whole project of climate finance, right from the documentation to implementation. Right now, I'm one of the ESG champions, and we have sustainability champions across the organization to make sure that issues to do with social safeguards and governance are prioritized. We have now included it in all our policies. Even for dealing with a client, we make sure there's gender balance everywhere.
At the time, the understanding at our institution was mainly that we are already incorporating gender in our processes, but we actually got to understand through several interactions that we actually need to do more.
We all came out from our discussions with DBSA very happy, and in fact got a nod from the highest office.
The project has assisted us to draft a gender safeguard standard. We can now start to mainstream gender in our policies and processes.
Looking at our policies isn't only good for the GCF. Refining them and improving them is good for governance in general. And this will place us in a much better position to access funding, not just from the GCF, but from any other global funding mechanism that exists.
Whilst this stage of the SACFP journey comes to an end, there remains much ground to cover on the road towards accessing sufficient flows of climate finance across the region.
We have found that you learn a lot from doing. And part of that journey is that you don't walk it alone.
Oh yes, I feel very much empowered. There's been a lot that SSN and the regional network has done in terms of empowering us.
That network of practitioners in the region is strengthened, making it a lot easier to learn from each other and build a strong community of practice, therefore starting and strengthening the journey towards capacitating the region. So we see it as a very important contribution.